I'd like to share a book with you called S.Girl by Sarah Pennypacker. And this book here, although you can find it in our fiction section in the library because it is fiction, but it's based on what really did happen over 50 years ago, over 60 years ago, 1958, when they had a campaign to get rid of the sparrows because they were eating the grain. But they had some problems associated with that. And there's a little note at the back. And I think sometimes it's interesting to kind of know the backstory so you can, when you're reading it, you can enjoy the story for what it is. And hundreds of millions of sparrows were killed, and this caused an imbalance in the ecosystem, and it was a really huge problem. And so let's get started with the Sparrow Girl. Read with permission by Disney Hyperion. One day, not too long ago, war was declared in China. Sparrows are our enemies. They eat too much grain. We must drive them from the land. Older brother held out the bag of firecrackers that father had given him to help fight the war. I like sparrows, Ming Li said quietly, walking home with older brother. She looked up and she tried to imagine the sky empty, silent. Mother and father were talking about the plan too. The village barn is empty now. Next year it will be full of grain. I could help you plant more seeds in the spring, father, Ming Li said, and weed the fields and you are not a farmer, father patted her hand. You are only a small girl. That night Ming Li couldn't sleep. Something bothered her, scratching her thoughts like a monkey. She crept to older brother's sleeping mat. How will the other birds know? She whispered, shaking his shoulder. Older brother rubbed his eyes and scowled in the moonlight. Won't our noise parade frighten the other birds too? What if the nightingales fly away, or the swallows, or pigeon? Younger sister, your brain is as small as sparrows, hissed older brother. Our leaders' plans are always perfect. They told us at school. Now go to sleep. The next morning, a tremendous din woke Minling. She ran to the window. A sea of people flooded the village, clanging gongs, crashing cymbals, beating drums, and shouting in their loudest voices. Firecrackers exploded like gunshots. Dress warmly, mother said, handing her a rice cake. You will be gone all day and into the evening. Ming Li and older brother picked up their pots and spoons and went outside. The villagers were running through the streets, making so much noise the ground itself rumbled. They were looking up to search for enemy sparrows, but not down to see if they might trample on a small girl. Ming Li clutched older brother's hand. He led her far away from the thundering crowd and into the orchard. Older brother stopped under a grove of apricot trees and lit a firecracker. Boom! A cloud of sparrows rose and flew across it to a row of pear trees. He followed and lit another firecracker beneath them. Ming Li clapped her hands above her ears, squeezed her eyes shut. But the firecracker's loud, golden sparks were exploding inside her head now. She wanted to fly away like a sparrow to some place high and safe. Ming Li set out for the road, but just as she reached it, she saw something fall from the sky like a stone. A group of villagers saw it too and hurried over. It's been frightened to death, Ming Li cried. We have to stop. Dead sparrows don't eat grain, crowed an old man beside her. More birds fell to the ground, lifeless. Aye, we're winning the sparrow war, cheered the others. Ming Li ran home. She climbed to the peak of the roof to check on Pigeon, but his cage was empty. Older brother must have sent him out yesterday. Suddenly, a plump silver bird flew towards her. "You've come home," Ming held out her arm for Pigeon to land on, but he only fluttered in the air for a moment and then fell with a soft thud on the curved clay tiles. Pigeon lay limp and still, except for his heart pounding beneath the pearly feathers of his breast. And then even he was still. Tears filled Bing Li's eyes. She tucked the bird into her jacket, climbed down from the roof, and set out for the orchard. Older brother was standing beneath a walnut tree, preparing to set off a firecracker. Ming Li touched his elbow. "Wait!" Together, they buried Pigeon under the walnut tree. "The noise parade will kill all the sparrows in China, maybe all the birds. We have to do something," Ming Li said. "Will you help me?" Older brother nodded, his eyes red. "But no one can disobey our leader. What can we do?" "Maybe some of the sparrows that fall to the ground are still alive, like Pigeon was. We could rescue them." All that afternoon, whenever she saw a bird fall, Ming Li hurried to the spot. Time after time, she was too late. But then, just as the lanterns were being lit, a small brown bird dropped beside a quince bush and then fluttered up for a moment. Ming Li's hope rose with it. She ran to the bush and found a sparrow struggling to his feet. She scooped the exhausted bird into her jacket. "You're safe now, little bird," she whispered. Around her, people were walking home, congratulating one another. "In 2 more days, there won't be a single sparrow left in all of China." Ming Li wrapped her jacket more closely around her. She could feel the bird's tiny heart beating against her own. "Yes, there will," she promised. She found older brother in the crowd. "Just one," she told him, letting him peek inside. Together they brought the little sparrow to Pigeon's empty cage. Ming Li filled the water cup and broke her rice cake into bits. The next morning, she and older brother hurried out to search for birds to see if any villagers were nearby when Ming Li ran up to a fallen sparrow. Older brother distracted them. "Look to the west, a flock of enemies!" But by afternoon, the birds were falling from the sky at a terrible rate. "They're like raindrops," said older brother. "The sky is raining birds." "No," said Ming Li. "They're like teardrops. The sky is crying birds." By nightfall, they had rescued 4 more sparrows. On the third day, the sky was nearly empty. Still, the villagers poured through the streets, clanging gongs, crashing cymbals, beating drums, and shouting in the loudest voices. Ming Li and older brother found only 2 more birds alive. 7 sparrows, said Ming Li, later looking at the cage on the rooftop when there used to be thousands, hundreds of thousands. 7 sparrows, said older brother, when there could have been none. That night, Ming Li lay awake. Her sparrow would need to fly soon, but if she let them loose, the villagers would hunt them. The next morning arose before dawn. She hurried to the rooftop, climbed down with the cage, and ran with it through the fields to the village barn. She released the birds inside. "Someday you'll fly under the sun again," she promised them. Each day after school, Ming Li visited her sparrows. She watched them fly between the rafters and then swooped down to peck at worms and bugs. But when spring came, Ming Li worried. As soon as the first crop was harvested, the farmers would open up the barn. Where would she hide her sparrows then? Already, father and older brother had begun planting. Ming Li ached to go with them. "Let me help you," she begged each day. "You are not a farmer," her father smiled. "You are only a small girl." One day in midsummer, Ming Li noticed her father looked worried when she came back from the fields. There is to be a meeting of all the farmers tomorrow, he said, in front of the village barn. The village barn? What if they went inside? The next morning, Mingli followed her father. She hid beside the barn. The farmers sat in a circle, their faces serious. I will have no grain this, one said. The locusts are eating it all. The plums in my orchard are full of worms, cried another. Weevils are eating my rice, added a third, and grasshoppers are chewing through the beanstalks. There will be famine, said Mingli's father. Our families will starve. A famine is when there's not enough food. And then there was silence while the truth settled over them, cold and dark as a winter night. Mingli couldn't help herself. She ran out from beside the barn. It's because there are no sparrows. There are no sparrows to eat the insects now. Mingli, go home, cried her father. But the eldest farmer held up his hand. She is right, he said. The sparrows were never our enemies. What does it matter? Said the second farmer. What's done is done. Mingli whispered something to her father into her father's ear. He stood. Show us. Mingli led the farmers to the barn and threw open the doors. She held her breath. How great would her punishment be? Inside, the sparrows rose from the rafters and flew out into the fresh summer air. The farmers gasped in wonder. Your daughter brings us a miracle, they cried. She brings us 7 miracles. From this day, sparrows will be safe in our village, and we will tell everyone we meet from other villages about the wisdom of Sparrow Girl. Yes, agreed Mingli's father. My daughter is the Sparrow Girl, but she is something more. He lifted her to his shoulder. Mingli is a true farmer. There we go. You know, it's kind of interesting because there was a campaign not only against the sparrows, but they had a 4-pest campaign. Mosquitoes and flies and rats and sparrows. All the things that were supposed to be, had bad things. I mean, mosquitoes had malaria and rats carried the plague. And so there was negative things, but you also have to think about the whole ecosystem and what happens when one thing is out of that system.